So the vision starts with a neighborhood, the suburbs. It's like a neighborhood, back garden, that kind of thing. The kind of place where you might have a barbecue. And there's a guy there, indistinct features really, but kind of like a middle-aged man. And he's chopping something, like on the table. And he's got a meat cleaver. But it's an unusual meat cleaver. It's a meat cleaver like a butcher would have, but there's a metal spine along the top, which suggests a surgical instrument. And he's chopping something. And the way that he acts is very robotic. And he's chopping something. And what he's chopping is he's chopping this meat up. What looks like pork chops, maybe, right? He's chopping it up. Now, the meat that he's chopping is human meat. He's chopping up humans or human meat. And there's no blood. There's just no blood, and he's chopping this meat up. And then all of a sudden he moves from there and he's into a different garden, doing the same thing over there. The implication being he's murdering someone, but he's doing the same thing there. And then he's back again. Quick, robotic, inhuman. Put it that way. Right. That's the end of the vision. What does it mean? Answers in the chat. No. Okay. Visions are like seeds. Or dreams. Like a dream is a seed. By tending it, giving it attention, it unfolds, produces fruit. So I had this vision and I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? I don't know what it means. I ain't going to figure it out. That would be interpretation, wouldn't it? It would be, working it out. Now, the first move that you make is that nothing is missing. Nothing is missing. Remember, that's the fundamental delusion, is that the thing that you care about is absent. Nothing is missing. Another way of putting this, what I just said, is that the origin of something is not different from its actual nature. So we tend to think, liberal cosmology, you encounter something, you do not know what its origin is unless you have evidence and you trace it back. That's the only way you can know what its origin is, right? Incorrect. If its origin is the greater, right, then it contains the greater. So the nature of something is the same thing as its origin. It demonstrates it. This is why binding is possible. It's why cosmological binding is possible. So, does everyone understand what the nature of a virus is? I'll probably butcher this. It's debatable whether a virus is even alive or not. It's something like an algorithm or a program running in a cell, right? In a living cell that determines the nature of the cell, how the cell functions, right? It's like that, but replicates itself and it spreads. And it just performs the function that it has. Again, like an algorithm. Why it's debatable whether or not it's even alive. I understand that that's a terrible explanation for a virus, but it's enough for us to understand what is the vision, right? Okay. What the virus does. It enters the cells of the lungs and also in the stomach. It enters the cells and it chops up the code in the cells, right, such that it performs in a different manner. The nature of the virus is that it chops up what it encounters. It does that at the level of the cell. You could say it's what the virus does at the level of the next level up, biologically, right? You could say it's what the virus has done to the neighborhood, to communities, chop them up. It's a man doing the chopping. What does that mean? It means that the chopping is man-made. It's man-made. It's a man doing it. It's chopping, separating up. So it's the chopping up or the separating of the biological cells, the code in the cells, neighborhoods. It acts like an algorithm, meaning it's simply performing its function. It's a man that's doing chopping. It's man-made. Now, brief side note to the vision. Back in January, before all of this happened globally, there was evidence online, could put it that way, that this is a lab flu. You might as well call it lab flu. that it came out of a lab. Anyway, leaving that aside, there are people, well-renowned, genuine professionals, two very famous HIV researchers, as one example of people who look at the virus and they say this has been engineered. Now, it doesn't mean it's been created out of nothing in the lab, which is what we tend to think because we're all liberals, created out of nothing. Rather, what happens is you get a virus and then you can insert genes into that virus that wouldn't normally be there. So one of these guys is like 90% sure that this was made in a lab. And there are others as well. But here's the thing. No one will ever talk about that or take responsibility for it because it will destroy research in that area. So this is a practice. I don't know if people know this. In labs, they do this. This is a thing that they do with viruses. They make them worse so that they can then create solutions to that particular virus, develop therapies for it and so on. Why would you create a virus that doesn't actually exist in nature that's really bad so that you can then develop therapies for it? Maybe there's something I'm missing, I don't know. Anyway, the point is I don't want to look at a paper trail, evidence to come up with a case for the fact that it's man-made. I'm leaving that aside. I'm mentioning it tangentially, like I'm just going to leave that aside. Just look at the vision. There's a man and it's man-made. He's chopping it up. This is the nature of the virus itself. It was chopped up. Surgically, it was chopped up. The manipulation of the virus in a lab, chopping it up, is itself bloodless. You could think of it as a bloodless murder in the sense that we've taken something from nature and we've chopped it up. We've divided it up. We've done that to other viruses to get the genes to put into this virus, right? We've chopped it up. That takes a very particular view of the world to decide to do that. Again, liberal cosmology. The nature of the virus is the nature of what it does. You can't separate the two. So it divides up, it separates up. It's man-made. It itself has been chopped up. It chops up living cells, replicates itself. It chops up neighborhoods, communities. The nature that gave rise to it existing, the viewpoint that gave rise to it existing, is a bloodless murder. The scientific enterprise is a bloodless murder. Vivisection is a bloodless murder, even though there's loads of blood. But it's to look at something in such a way that you can chop it up, to take it apart, to see what it is. That requires murdering something, denying something about its nature. It's a very particular view of things, view of the world, right? Now, our neighborhoods have been chopped up. We've been separated from each other. You've noticed, haven't you, that we all wear a wall on our face now? And what's this led to? Everyone goes indoors, and what have we been more immersed in than we've ever been immersed in before? We've been more immersed in the online world, in social media, the consumption of social media, the use of this kind of video call, what we're doing now, which is a parody of human contact, mobile phones. We've gone further into the sleep of the machine, you could put it that way, which itself mostly consists of algorithms that do the same thing, atomize, separate. So the spirit of COVID dovetails with the end of globalism, and the increasing sleep of the machine, we might put it that way. The viewpoint that made it possible to engineer a virus that could escape out of a lab through sheer incompetence, right? That could get out of a lab through incompetence. The outcome from it is inseparable from the overall cultural movement. They're all of a piece. Does that make sense? So this isn't like there's a random thing there and it has that nature and that's the end of that. It dovetails with the same cultural moment. What's happening online? Should we talk about algorithms? This is what algorithms do to you online. They want you looking. of what you're looking at, right? The best way to do that is to make you feel awful, to make you feel bad. And that's how they get you to look at it. And it needs to be ramped up enough that you're glued to what you're looking at. Attention, which means that more money from advertisers, right? But it can't be too much, can it? Otherwise everything falls apart. So it's a constant climb of anxiety and tension, and it never lets up. It starts off like that, and then another one starts, and then another one starts, and it just climbs. So we're constantly wound up. Not too much. It has to find the right balance, because you'll log off, won't you, if you look at it, if it gets too much. So it has to be just at that right tension. Now, what does that mean? It means most people can't deal with mainstream media. They find their own niche. First of all, if you're using the major platforms online, the algorithm, even Google search, will give you what it thinks you want. So you're in your own bubble. Now you're in your own bubble. And it will lead you, oh, can people still hear me? Right. So the algorithms already work in such a way that they separate us. Still frozen. Can you hear me though? Very pixelated. Everything's fine at my end. Like there's no bit choppy, but okay. Okay, I'll continue. The algorithms already chop us up, right? So if you just use Google search, you think you're using something that everyone else sees, and that if you do a search term, you'll see what everyone else sees. But you're already not doing. That's already not happening. Right. So that's just if you use the main platforms. Now, a lot of people can't look at news anymore or mainstream media anymore, so that they look at curated sources, let's say, on these platforms. When we do that, and then we only look to the people that seem to be saying what we like to hear, we're moving into an even more concentrated bubble. If you get kicked off of a platform, and that's happening more and more now as time's going on. I don't know if people are noticing. First, it was the far right. Now it's just people who are politically in the centre. Now the centre left is going. Libertarians are gone. They're in the centre politically. They're gone. Right. What do? They move on to alternative platforms. So not only is the algorithm made bubbles on the same platform, now some of these bubbles are moving off onto their own platforms. The dregs have already gone that way. The internet itself is already forming its own geographical bubbles. China, the internet that's available there is very different from what it is in America. Even in Europe, it's different from America. I said this to someone the other day. Our culture has turned into foam. Foam. It's turned into foam. We're all in these little bubbles. If you think you're not in a bubble, right, you're deluded. You are deluded. Right. I'm in a bubble. We're all in bubbles. It's delusion. We always think, even if we're like aware of this stuff, we always think we're immune to propaganda. We're immune to the algorithm because we know. I know about it. So and the people that I follow, they're just telling the truth. Right. There's nothing, we don't know. We're all in bubbles. So the algorithm, you can see, it's the fragmentation, the atomization, and what are we doing? We're increasingly moving into using what you might describe as an extension of ourselves, but what it actually is a replacement. This isn't human contact. This isn't real. This is a parody of what me talking to you in a room would be. Relationships online, how people talk to themselves, to each other. It's all a parody. If you take the human, what a human really is, and that's what Magia means, doesn't it? The divine human being. It's a total image of what a human being is, right? You take the human being and you distort it and you chop it up. You make a parody of it. You replace it with an algorithm. You make it an algorithm. Online conversation is a parody of conversation. It's a pathological version of it. There is nothing that isn't pathological about how we interact on these things. It's all of a piece. One way of thinking about that foam is that it's the froth. It's the froth around the mouth of the corpse of liberalism. That's where we are. That's where we are. And it's choked on its own word. What do I mean by that? I mean, we replace the actual word with our own, which is a parody of it. It's a parody of it. And if you cut off the noumena, if you cut off the divine breath, the air, another way of understanding it, isn't it, is the flow of water from the fountainhead. Well, another way, a very traditional one, is the breath is the air. That's what the divine is. Well, the Holy Spirit became in Christianity, didn't it? We cut that off when we became liberal. We don't need the word anymore. We don't need that source of life anymore. It all comes from here and comes from us. Well, it's choked on it and it's dead. So I know that all of that's pretty rambling. I've taken ages to describe it. Probably didn't do the best job. But you can see that it's all of a piece. The spirit of COVID is part of the spirit of the times. That's its place. And that's the technological sleep. That's what's happening to us. And everything online is what? It's just a phrase I used in the past was like digital Hades. It's where we play out our shadows collectively. And it spills out into the world, doesn't it? And it should be obvious to everyone, right? And I hope it is, that what happens in the world, the actual details of what happens in the world, right, does not at any point make contact with the bubble that we're in. What really happened no longer makes contact with reality. The culture that we live in is a technical culture that started with modernity. That means the application of technique, which is the shadow, isn't it, of logic, which came from Parmenides. Technique, a very particular way of looking at things. It's a bloodless murder. The interest that technique has in its application is in efficiency, doing something in the most efficient way possible. This is what algorithms do. This is what technology does. And it's not just machines, there are other versions of technique. But communism, fascism, the liberal state, these are all political techniques, or techniques of statecraft. It's what's most efficient. We change ourselves to meet the technique where it's at, not the other way around. What the algorithm has done is it's made politics efficient. So the most efficient form of politics is highly polarized, extreme viewpoints. That's the most efficient form of politics, isn't it? So all the nuance can go away, can disappear. Not only online, but now we see it in the streets. It's happening in the streets. Man, funny how the footage has become choppy. It doesn't like to be named.